you're still looking for people to raise their hand, right? Say, hey, I'm willing to do something that I don't normally do. The other one I think we have a lot of room for is people who ask good questions and want to know your opinions. If people are willing to give you feedback, they're willing to invest in you and want to see you be successful. I think if you raised your level of participation to an expert level where you thought you were providing everyone the right pathway of the things you wanted to learn. I said, so I think you'll be surprised at how people will give back if they see you participate at a high level. I think we should be more open to different people's opinions, no matter where you are in your career ladder or expertise on the topic. I think mid-career folks sometimes get trapped in saying, I'm not accelerating fast enough. I'm not getting to the next job. I didn't get promoted. I was one of those people.
Welcome to the Cultivating Leaders Podcast. I'm your host and curiosity captain, Nicole Ursig. If you are ready to lead better, think bigger, and grow faster, you're in the right place. We bring you real conversations with top leaders across food and agriculture, focused on the practical skills and mindsets you need to lead in today's environment. Today's guest is a leader shaping how talent and teams evolve in a rapidly changing agricultural industry. Scott Kay, Vice President of U.S. Crop at BASF, brings a unique perspective on developing people, building high-performing teams, and preparing the workforce for what's next. In an industry facing constant innovation, global challenges, and the need for collaboration, leadership isn't just about today. It requires building for what is coming next. If you're leading a team, hiring new talent, or thinking about how to stay relevant as a leader in agriculture, this conversation will challenge you on how to think about developing people and yourself. Scott, welcome to the pod.
Hey, how are you doing, Nicole?
I'm doing good. Well, other than that,
Whoa.
my microphone almost just fell. Other than that, I'm doing great. It's so good to see you.
Great to see you. That's a beautiful day here in North Carolina. So,
Love to hear it. Love to hear it. Well, Scott, why don't we dive in? Tell me a little bit, and our audience, Vice President of Crop at BASF. What does that mean, and what does your job look like?
yeah, I think good question. My job, I often just say that it entails a lot in that it's I'm in charge of across the U.S. Business, sales, marketing, technical services, and business operations. And so there's right around 400 people in that organization, and so there's a lot going on every day. I think the nice thing is it always involves customers, and so and to me that's what we wake up every day wanting to make sure that we helping them succeed in what they're trying to accomplish. We have a really strong statement that I like, in that farmers have the biggest job on earth, and that they do it for the love of farming. And so to me, that's always resonated, because I grew up on a farm. If you're thinking about how did he get that job, and what's nice is my dad thinks I'm still coming back. So if he watches this, I am. So just I say it one more time, but it's just taken me a while, right? So I've had the ability to be with BSF for 35 years, or nearly. I'll celebrate that anniversary this year. And it's been a great journey, because my family's been connected to farming. I stay connected with them, and get to hear what they're seeing and doing. But I've had a chance to see it from many different areas of our business and other customers as well. So prior to this, I was in Canada and managed our Canadian business, and so that was also a great experience. But I've held nearly all jobs that report to me now. I haven't never been in technical services. I had a business operations before, when I spent some time in logistics and supply chain for a little bit, and so that was very interesting. I think very foundational too, because how people receive your brand once it's been sold, I think, is also very important. So I think there's just so if you talk about my job, that it caused lots of different aspects, and so it's pretty fun every day. I still really enjoy it. So
Well, good. So tell me, is this what you always imagined you would be doing? Did you think you were going to spend your entire career, 35 years, at one place and be where you are today?
No, I thought for sure when I went to college, I thought for sure I was going to graduate, um, go back to the farm. I was really interested in politics at the time, and so, um, and then once I got into this career, I thought maybe district manager. I try my hand at marketing, and then there'd be something else. So, um, but I think for me, it just became really evident that um, this job has a lot of the same aspects that I would have had I gone back to the farm, or had I, in that, so, or had the political or the community involvement. You still have those same kind of things go on here every day. I talked to a lot of people about that. In that, the different clubs and organizations that I was involved in college or now, you're still looking for people to raise their hand, right? Say, hey, I'm willing to do something that I don't normally do, and so the volunteering part is still really rewarding, whether that's for a project or an actual community event. And so to me, that's still one of the things that I think is pretty fun, is to as you see people through their career, that became my career probably a little less important, and I really started to focus more on how are other people doing, how are they getting here. And so I understand the podcast. We need to share a little bit more about me, but my day to day, I probably think about others and how they're developing.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that something you've always done, Scott? Because in the time that I've known you, like it seems innate to your personality, whether you're trying to lift up a student and make a connection, or even the team that you lead. Or is that something that you've had to develop over time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think from my side, it's just been something that I I think what I found is that if I got people to participate, then they could have the same enjoyment as I did. And so, and while it was a little more work, I just felt like not everybody's wired to just raise their hand for new experiences. What I found myself in my career was I might even volunteer for projects that I might not be the expert in the room. And then I work really hard to get one of my peers who was the expert to do it with me. And so that was something that I took a lot of, and then we both got credit, so I think that was the other thing, is then you would also demonstrate equal credit. And so that part I found really rewarding, because people like to be recognized. People like to be successful and to offer their expertise to change outcomes. And so, to me, that was always something that I like to do. So I did that when I was from high school to college, and then I found, um, in a very good way, that's the same kind of experience I could have at BSF, no matter the team. And so and then from an early career people, that is something I still look at resumes to see, have they ever done any volunteering? Are they responsible for leading some teams? Were they involved in some clubs or anything like that might come up in the conversation, because that they've experienced having to recruit other people for them to be successful. And so when you see that, you just know, okay, they're gonna really get it. I would say even my own son, who's a senior at NC State, and he got elected to be the Ag Club president. But when I saw him having to really dive in, he goes, "It's hard to recruit people to do things, And but then you see the reward of the smiling pictures of people who just accomplished something. Like I think they just won a kickball tournament. Well, you're in the last month of the year. I'm not sure a kickball tournament was high on anybody's list that day. So that there's a level of recruitment followed by a level of excitement. And so I think that's that part to me is what really brings that. And so your good eye, Nicole. I probably do come by that naturally.
Yeah. Well, it seems innate, and I love the way you phrased it, because I often haven't thought about that work of leadership, because I'm a galvanizer myself. And you're right, there is a special energy required to this, and this is part of sales, right? As well, like convincing people to come and be a part of something. And that's happening whether you're trying to hire someone to join a workforce that you lead, or really just even getting people to get excited about something in a day-to-day business, right? Of coming along for where the business strategic goals are going or what we're working on right now. I think it's a labor of leadership that's often overlooked.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the couple of years ago, I had a chance to bring one of our, newer employees, but probably ready for something else, and to go into to other groups or associations, but let them take the lead, um, which wasn't expected by the audience, but I think was super good for development. To me, that part was great, and I think in ag industry, people are very gracious for development, and they're okay with it, and sharing what they might have. The other one I think we have a lot of room for is people who ask good questions, um, and want to know your opinion. So um, I think if there are people out there that are thinking about, well, how do I get an audience? I think you want to be someone who can ask really good questions of other people, and uh, and don't be too quick to answer. I think it's that first question plus about three or four, maybe five more before you start talking. And so I think that's another skill I think people should try to learn.
Yeah, I really like that too because I think often, especially for younger career people, it can be really intimidating to be in the room or be at the table, and you can feel like you need to have the answers or understand the technical conversation or discussion. But sometimes what's most valuable is if you can ask valuable questions. You don't have to know all of the answers.
You really don't. I think it's and I depends on your relationship. To me, the in a company like BASF, you have the ability to almost role play something out before you have to do it yourself the first time, right? So I think it's and that was a skill that I had learned through training, very new in my career. I would ask a lot of questions about someone's call. So maybe it was a peer on my group that was a sales peer, and I would ask them, how did it go? What did they say? Could you be more specific? How did they react to that conversation? And so there's a lot of trying to learn about how that exactly went down compared to what I thought I was preparing for. And so it's really an informal mentoring, if you will, in that they're asking questions, so it makes it more natural versus a role play, because I'm asking them about a real situation they just had experienced that morning. And but those curiosity questions, our next conversations, as I did that over and over with some of the same people, they also started just sharing. And then I think they also realized that my approach might be different than theirs, and now we're exchanging. And so to me, there's this evolution that also can take place if you'll put that asking good questions into practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Scott, I'm curious too from a coach perspective, because I think I've seen you do this and you just talked about this a little bit earlier in this conversation. When do you know when to push someone into a development opportunity of like sometimes we all need that little shove outside of our own comfort zone versus when that might make someone too uncomfortable or when they're not ready for it?
Yeah, so I think the most of the time my strategy on that sort of is that, let's say I don't think they've had a lot of executive experience. So I'll generally set up a joint call, joint presentation, and and then that way we will have a chance maybe to practice ahead of the presentation together, split up the conversation, and then talk about what questions we're going to get. The I think the other one is too is that a lot of times you're asked to present, um, but I think also we talk about what's our opinion, what's your opinion, and so I think that's also a way to prep and to role play something before it happens. And so, but that's generally how I've done it. I'm trying to think if I've ever done it any differently in other roles, but sometimes I do that both internally facing and with customer facing, and just try and set up those areas. The other way is, like, I might be asked to present at a meeting. I know that the audience, a few of BSF folks are the expert. So I will set up before the meeting and say, hey, look, if I get these kind of questions, I'm going to yield to you because I think they should be asking you anyway. You know what I mean? You'll be the one who answers it later. And so, and it's also a way for me to declare them as the expert. So I think sometimes that helps people to get over that bridge, right? So sometimes you see in careers where they always yield to a boss, so they want to talk to somebody else. I think sometimes that's unfair. And so I would always say, Nicole, I think Nicole has the answer to that question, right? I think she's the expert. And so sometimes just me declaring who the expert is on that topic is also really important to establish people in that position or role. The In an office setting, sometimes you have to repeat that over and over so that people are calling them. Oh, it looks like we're missing this person on our invite list. It looks like, why are they here? Well, I just figured that this topic's going to come up, and they'll have the most detailed response and answer to the question. And so sometimes as a leader, you just have to keep pushing people along so that they get in there. What happens is they'll go from being uncomfortable to being more comfortable. And now the pride comes out from my standpoint when I see them now talking to some of those senior leaders in the hallway. So now you know we've really made a connection, right? So I think that's another strategy to use.
I appreciate that. I think it shows that being the leader isn't always about being in the spotlight, but redirecting the spotlight to the right people as well.
Yeah, that's very good. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, Scott. So I'm really curious. How do you react when someone on your team fails?
Yeah, the standard answer would be it depends, but I think to me, I think it's just a matter of talking through it, and what's everybody learning in this environment. No one's ever going to be perfect. So to me, there's probably two ways to manage that. One, I hope that they've heard us say that there's no harm in failing, right? And so at BSF, people should know that there hasn't been any harm in failing. And then how do you manage through it? I think is the next area. So are people feeling accountable? Do they have solutions to change that outcome? Would they do it different? Um, did they see it coming? Like maybe there was problems along the way. So I think there's all those things. But to me, um, people really should be managing on this idea that failure is not the outcome. I think that that's just part of it. And then how you resolve or turn it into something else should be viewed as the outcome.
I think it makes sense. Knowing that it's safe to fail, but that there's going to be accountability is what it sounds like. It sounds like that's a dependency of like if they failed but it was good effort. Okay, what have we learned and how do we move forward? Versus like, hey, here's some accountability if it's needed.
Yeah, to me, it's a those can be some of the best situations in a work environment is that assessment, and so knowing from that personally, sometimes it's I might sound like a broken record on this asking good questions, but I think seeking to understand why it didn't work is really really important. And so I think at one time as a marketer, I added up that there was 28 different touch points to be successful. And so that's why I said sometimes it depends. If you had a shipping or a manufacturing topic that came up, it might involve a lot of those different people that you now need to go back to and with to say, okay, so how would we debrief this? What would we all change? Because it might just not be you as one person in that mix. And then I think as you move as you move into that middle career and beyond, you'll see that it's probably more involved than just one person, right? So I think that's why don't be so hard on yourself because it likely involved more than one person. I think it's just to be part of the solution that fixes it, that diagnoses it. I think is probably the more important part.
Yeah. How, Scott, in your leadership career and growth journey, uh, I'm sure there's been failures and I'm sure there's been painful feedback. How do you deal with and recommend for others to deal with kind of the pain of that growth, of whether you've heard feedback that hurts and needs to be addressed, or you've had that project or something go wrong and had a failure?
I think through some training we had that was to debrief after every situation. And so to me, that was the absolute best way of doing things. So, as an example, you may give a presentation at a national business conference. Well, if we debriefed as a team post that, and you were willing to handle feedback from your peers that weren't presenting, or that quick feedback as in the moment is some of the best feedback and can be the most critical, right? Because and so I think that to me is probably the best kind of feedback to get is that once be open right afterwards. How did I do? No, seriously, tell me what you would correct. Tell me what did I answer the questions. So I think these. So one, if you're willing to ask for that debrief, that's really good. If you're the leader or a new leader, uh, one of the conditions could be before you go into a presentation or a customer call is to say, let's debrief afterwards. Let's let's all take notes about what we observe and how we're going to improve, because it's likely not going to be our only time we do this. And we've been working so hard on the content or whatever it is, right? So I think it's a chance to thanks for your preparation, but let's make it as perfect as possible by debriefing post that event or post that call.
Scott, is that a habit that has been coached into you? Because as you're answering this, I'm now reflecting on the times that like we've done things together, and you'll come off of a stage or we'll come out of a room and you do this, you'll pull people aside and be like, how did that go? What could have gone better? Like, now that I'm hearing you talk about this is a habit that you have just built into your day to day.
Yes, so I think it's we might follow it tighter after a presentation, but I think Afterburners was the group that we had train us on that. But and they were flying a plane and a route, right? They come back and say, "No, I could have made that tighter. I could have done this," those kind of things. But yes, I can remember as a very new in my career and presenting and coming off the stage and having a trainer say, here's your list of 20 things, right? I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't have 20 topics, but I but I think it's what they thought was I was just open to the feedback. So it could have just been, part of the section could have been on mannerisms. The other could have been on clarity. The other one could have been on, did I get the word right out of, some new product name or, whatever it was. But I think, and then, feedback is your friend. I think that's the other thing you got to just remember is that if people are willing to give you feedback, they're willing to invest in you and want to see you be successful. And so um, I think the other thing is if you're a leader, to seek feedback is also really good for people to observe, because you'll send the signal that you're not perfect or that you'd like to make sure that you're delivering on what their expectations were. And so I think there's all those aspects of this. So I'll probably call Nicole afterwards for sure and say, how did that go? But anyway, it's yeah, for sure built ingrained in what I do.
Yeah, I feel like it's a muscle that you've probably built over time. But as you were answering that question, sorry, I just had flashbacks of like, oh man, Scott does this almost every time we interact or do something. I think it's a modeling of a good habit to build as a leader. So I'm curious, Scott, you spent a lot of time, you've grown a large team, you've developed yourself, developing other people, and spending 35 years in the crop business, you've seen a lot of change over time in agriculture. What skills do you think are non-negotiables for success in today's agriculture industry?
Oh boy. Well, I think um, I think self improvement is a non-negotiable. I think to be successful in the environment, it's probably cliche to say things change rapidly, but I think this idea that you're going to have to continue to improve yourself is for sure something people should be thinking about. And this is what I'm thinking about is that you want to do that. And I think the first book that I got in the business world was Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. if you listen to this and haven't read it, I would say you should read it. It hasn't grown old, so I think it's still there today. I I think this renewing piece, everyone has to be facing it with AI. So I think um, AI is going to be something that you're going to want to do to become more efficient. I think um, I think it's going to allow you to be a better leader, a better at whatever your field is. I think AI is gonna have an impact, and and I would embrace it because I think it'll allow you and your team, if you lead a team, to continue to personalize things, but at a much deeper level or much faster. And so I think the goal should be to embrace, and not sit back in fear or worry about it eliminating some job. I I think it's enabling some new job, a new connection. So I would probably flip that from eliminating to enabling. And so I think it'll give you a much better perspective on what you can do to speed up your connections. And so I think that to me is one of those things that's out there. Um, I think I can remember sitting on a plane talking to someone, and I think they must have been the trainer, and I just didn't realize it at the time, but they taught a class about crossing the chasm at that time. And if you looked at it, I went to Iowa State, so you had this Rogers curve that talked about the 10% of adoption, or adoption curve is what people have referred to it as. And I think I was always, it made me very thoughtful about there's things that you're going to do that are just going to be naturally occur, like the first 10% of adoption or 5%. There's going to be some trend that's natural. So to me, what AI should help us do is whatever your current baseline of things are, this should help you accelerate. And so to me, that is where I would go back to saying we want to use that for advancement, and to do things differently. And it could be on the analysis side of after, or it could be as you go through how you're going to use it. So that's why I say it's an enablement. You're going to really move with AI.
I'm curious now, how are you implementing AI or enabling AI at BASF? And how are you, Scott, in working it into your own executive workflow?
Yeah, so Copilot certainly is a way to do it better. I think just need to be careful to make sure you don't lose all personal touch. But I do think it can enable you to be better email writer, a better paper. Have it check you a little bit to see what's happened that way. The other one is to embrace technology tools. So like Salesforce, Salesforce could lead to AI. So are you going to contribute to it, or are you going to stand back and not be hurt? So I think Salesforce is another way. We have other tools at BSF that have that same capability. Algorithms that are built into tools that we have at BSF. Zarvio being one of those. To me, is another way to interface differently, more uniquely, and to help people along the way. So Zarvio Bioenergy, we're waiting for the government to establish what 45Z is going to mean to ethanol farmers, as an example. And so, if we can accelerate that so that farmers can take advantage of the incentives that are there in a simpler, faster way to do their jobs, and to help them to excel by gaining cents on the bushel, or maybe it's more than that, but I think that is something that we should be wanting to do. And so that's how I look at those things. I gave you specific examples, but I'd be looking at things that maybe you haven't adopted that have the background of AI, that are huge enablers. And just because of your own change curve, that you really need to reflect on that change curve for adoption. And then that's where you come back to with questions. So I would be looking out and saying, who's really adopting this? And then I would go back to the questions I asked about a sales call before and say, how do you see value in it? What are you saying? Would you mind if I followed you? Could I call you about the things that I'm writing in that? So I think there's a huge human connection that's going to take shape because of AI and because your own adoption, whether you are the quick adopter or not so fast, So um, to me, these early career folks, I mean, I'm so happy that we have them in our organization because they tend to be early adopters of this. They've grown up with it, and so and I'm not too proud to say that I need help with my own adoption some days, to because I might not be as quick a study as them. But I think those are the great conversations to have in an organization or in a community, um, is to get back to those things about everybody's learning something different. We all have different skills.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love that bold take that AI can enable deeper human connection because I think so often people see the disconnect that we have. Oh, it's just robots talking to each other versus no, this can enable the way that you connect with your coworkers or you're able to connect with more people or create some type of deeper human connection. So I really enjoy that. And I think that's a bold but positive outlook for how to use some of these tools, especially in a leadership mindset.
Yeah, I think I had a discussion with someone who has the ability, but just thought it was busy work. AI must be new busy work. And I said, have you ever reflected on that your peers would really like to know what you're doing and how well you do it, and that you could shape the way we go about doing our work by participating. But I said, but rather than look at it as administrative or another chore, I said, think if you raised your level of participation to an expert level where you thought you were providing everyone the right pathway of the things you wanted to learn. I said, so I think you'll be surprised at how people will give back if they see you participate at a high level.
Yeah, I love that encouragement. So, Scott, you were also talking about kind of reaching across generations and different types of leaders in the workplace, where you, from an executive standpoint, maybe learning from a younger person. I'm curious. BASF seems to be so intentional about bringing young people into the workforce and young people into your talent development program. Tell me why that is such a whether it's a core value or strategic pillar at BASF of making sure you find some of the best in the best young up and comers and making sure you're bringing them into BASF and nurturing them.
Yeah, I think it's always been that I think that early in career, late in career doesn't really matter. I think we have a real opportunity to put different people at the table and give people a real seat at the table. And so to me, the core value has been that if you're part of our professional development team, you you're part of the team. You're not part of the development team that somehow is secondary. You're really part of the team, and it could be someone just right out of college and we're going to an AFA event. I have no problem saying, so what do you think students want to hear about? It likely isn't my 35-year career from point A to point Z, right? So, but I think those kind of insights. The other one is that, um, to me, I think we also often think that you have to have 35 years of experience to have an opinion um, about 45Z or about renewable fuel or and I think someone met at AFA that was on the leadership, and she had an internship with a ethanol company and had brilliant ideas about what to do, and different ways to approach it, and so I think we shouldn't be so. I think we should be more open to um, different people's opinions, no matter where you are in your career ladder or expertise on the topic. And so, I a lot of times would debrief in those meetings and say, "What did you hear them say?" And when you do that, if everybody knew going in you wanted to listen to what people said, it's amazing what you miss. And so to me, that was just fascinating because you get someone new to the team. Well, you wanted to know what they saw, what they heard. Those first few months, what they saw and heard were priceless. And so I view the same thing as when you have early in career, whether that's an internship or whether they're coming on and being to your team for the first time as a full-time employee. You want to know what they're seeing and hearing. Um, and so I think that's because their perspective is likely different. Um, and I think if you've ever gone and taking notes, if you were the presenter, you think you heard everything, but you likely didn't take as good of notes as if you just had a note taker in the room, right? And so so to me, this collaboration part is really part of it. The thing that it did for BSF early on is that we have a lot of innovation to launch. And so how people learn, how adults learn is amazing. And so it really pushed us to try different ways to teach, to launch products. Um, and so whether that was podcasts or whether it was videos or bars and charts or interview people to see how they would do, but it really opened us up to having the ability to teach ourselves, let alone customers, and to do it annually. And so to me, that was a habit we really needed to get into, and it really has worked. The other area that I think has been really cool is that most organizations, at least ours, was thriving for mentorship without ever saying it. And so if you've had a career for 5 years and you think, oh my gosh, I can help you onboard you because here's all the things I experienced when I first started. And then imagine what the people who have been here for 20 years and 30 years would like to teach you to help you be successful in your career. And so when you have both those dynamics going at the same time, it's really special. And I think that's what we see going on here at BSF is that we have both camps wanting to be mentors or buddies at the same time. And so it's really a cool dynamic. And I would love to go back and be a PDP. I would do that tomorrow if given the chance. I would be happy to go back and be part of the professional development program because of what you could learn in an accelerated way. And so to me, those are just some of the things that I really like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is so cool that at this point in your career, you're like, man, I wish I could go back to the beginning and start again with what we're doing today. I'm curious, Scott, as you talk about mentorship, as you look back on your career, was there someone who was the right mentor at the right time for you?
Yeah, and I think it's always one of those things where I had a mentor. You want me to say his name or?
If you feel comfortable with it, yeah.
Yeah, his name was Bob Bertram. I'll leave out my father, right? Of course, he's probably responsible for my all the ideas I have because he was entrepreneurial. But this mentor was a teammate. Um, he certainly had lots of experience, and it opened me up to saying I need help on do I have the right presentation? I would like to go see what happens when we present these slides. Do you mind doing that? And so what I think what he liked is I had a different view of how it goes, and he had done it the same way forever. And we're talking about just putting customer presentations together. So then we decided let's just take a week and put together the presentation together. And that evolved to I think we need to chart out this year from the beginning of the season to the end what we need, and then we're going to capture all those things in between. So it was really great because you could talk about what went good, what went bad that day, and there was never really when we found out there weren't any bad days. We just had to think about new ways to do it, and so I think that's the was always kind of the hurdle I think people go through is that if it's just an experience and it's not it's not the outcome because we were determined to change the outcome to be a positive, and not accept as, well, I didn't do so good as a failure. I think if people would take that mindset, that let me debrief, let me figure this out, that it's just a problem they haven't solved for yet, I think people would be a lot happier. Um, and then that way that they would really see that you're just going to try and show up differently, ask your questions better, those kind of things. And so that's kind of what I learned. And then the other thing I learned in that setting is that there's a lot of good approaches. And so and the more I practiced, the better. So my team today, I would say the only difference between today, what you saw, and what is that you didn't see what happened 3 weeks ago when I first started practicing. You didn't realize I started practicing a while ago. And so that's what I learned over my career, is that I need to start somewhere with the practicing. And then but I just learned incrementally each time. And then I go again either the next day or the next week. And so I think that's what I think is what I learned from some of the mentoring as well. The other one is that I think mid-career folks sometimes get trapped in saying, I'm not I'm not accelerating fast enough. I'm not getting to the next job. I didn't get promoted. I was one of those people who thought that I should already be at middle management and managing people and products and all those sorts of things very early in my career. And it was really important to have a mentor that says, here's all the type of things you should want to be learning and becoming more of an expert at before that jump. And the idea of having a lateral move to progress your career was something. I think half of my moves have been lateral. And so that I don't see that. I like to tell people about that, but I think that is something that really can allow you to have both breadth and depth. And I think probably accelerates you more than you think. And so because you can describe what failure looks like, you can describe how you turned it around. You can normally describe um, what you might consider next, right? To go deeper further for the next person. And then I think the other thing, as you get to that middle career, hopefully you're working for a manager that says, I'd like to advance you before I advance me. And so I think this idea that their career is really important is the other way to look at that.
Yeah. I really appreciate you saying that about the lateral moves, because I think that ties back to where we started our conversation around when you talked about your role today at BASF and how you've done a lot of the jobs on the team that you lead today. And I think being able to be a good leader at that level, like if you've been a marketer, if you've been in the field as a salesperson, if you have done some of this operations work, it makes it it makes it so much, I'm not going to say easier, but maybe easier actually. Yes, like you can talk the talk because you've walked the walk of a lot of the people that you lead today.
Yeah, I think what it's probably helped me over time with is that there's a lot of times I'm not offering my expertise or help because the person is doing so well, right? So I think I also don't want it to be their burden, other people's burden. But sometimes it has worked out really well when you have a new person that comes in, then you can say, hey, you can lean on me, or if you're those sorts of things. So I think it's helped with dialogue, like where do you need me, right? If we're just going to work on a team, then I think I'm also willing to help. I think that's the other part it makes it really fun. That team environment, you can't beat it. So and if that's how everybody feels, boy, then the sharing is really gone up. So I think this idea of doing it from a team perspective, I think that really helps a lot.
Absolutely. Okay, Scott, we are going to switch gears a little bit and go
Okay.
into the rapid fire segment
All right.
where I'm going to ask you questions and you try to answer in one sentence or less, and I
Ooh.
try to not ask follow up questions.
Okay.
So, Scott, what is something you had to unlearn to become a better leader?
Ooh. To unlearn to be a better leader, not be so critical of when I didn't perform as well.
I think That's relatable. What is one leadership habit that has made the biggest difference in your career?
Be open to change.
One word that you would use to describe the future of the ag workforce.
Highly needed.
What is a leadership skill every manager should be working on right now?
How to make AI accelerate their team.
What is a daily habit that makes you a better leader?
Easily renewal by saying, what can I do to be better?
And what is one belief about leadership that you've changed your mind on?
That really all the success comes from the team.
You had to, so question, I'm going to ask a follow-up question on this one. Did you have to change your mindset on like success coming from you to success coming from the team?
Yes, I very specifically had it happen went from a single contributor out to leading a team, back into that same team, from sales back into marketing, and realize how strong, if we could have a really strong team, it we could move a lot faster. We could be a lot more prepared. There's so many strengths that derive from it, and so probably was witnessing it, but didn't do it consciously. But that next turn did it very consciously.
Yeah, makes sense. I think it's a journey. At least I had to go through it myself too, in transitioning from individual contributor to team
Yeah,
leader. It's a
yeah,
mindset shift
yeah.
for sure. Okay, so Scott, at AFA, we love hot takes. So this is unconventional or bold opinions that our guests have. So I am curious, what is a hot take that you have on leadership or the future of agriculture?
So I mentioned 7 Habits of Highly Effective People earlier. The other book that we have a book club going on is Who Moved My Cheese?
Oldie but a goodie as well.
An oldie but a goodie, and I I I think that we should reread it and describe it in today's terms. And so, no matter where you were in your career, I even wonder if you won't change what you thought you appreciated about the book, if that won't change when you read it again.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So is that the must read, you think, Scott, for any leader?
So long as you're going to read it with your team, I think it's a must read. And I'm assuming because you're already going to have read every AI book, you're going to have a speaker come, you're going to do a lot of things around AI. I I just think I would reflect on who you are and yourself from that Move My Cheese. So I think it'll just make it more personal. It'll be less about the AI and more about, am I in a position to adopt or not? Am I going to keep readopting? I mean, how fast is it going to change, right? So I think if we all listen, we're going to say, oh my gosh, it might change daily, yearly, but it's going to keep changing. And so I think I think it'll help people just adjust.
Yeah. How are you going to deal with the change that is
Yes.
inevitable? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, thank you so much. This has been so wonderful. I always enjoy any time I get the opportunity to chat with you. And you know, at AFA, we are all about building bridges. So, where can listeners connect more with you and learn more about the work happening at BASF?
Yeah. So I think, to me, the one cool thing is that when I read mostly agriculture articles, um, if I'm inspired by that, or I think it'd be worth it for somebody else, I post it on LinkedIn. And so to me, that's probably where you would find me the most. And don't worry, you won't have to look at me like maybe you are with this camera focused on me. Um, my marketing director and I have both subscribed to the idea that the camera is better focused out, capturing what others are doing. So that's where you find me.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. I have enjoyed learning about your leadership journey, your lessons in how to coach and develop people, and the work that you guys are doing at BASF. So, thank you so much for joining us today. And thanks to all our listeners for joining us for another episode of the Cultivating Leaders Podcast, where leaders grow. Thanks for listening to the Cultivating Leaders Podcast, where leaders grow. If this episode challenged your thinking, be sure to share it with someone else who is on a similar leadership journey. You can stay connected with the Cultivating Leaders Podcast by following Ag Future America on social media or drop a comment in the episode description. We'll see you again on the next episode.